for the second time in a week. And I know you miss me, and I know you're happy to see me. So today we're going to be talking about the housing market that just started crashing, because yes, it has started crashing and it's going to get really interesting. Unfortunately, not for the people that own houses. Hopefully, I don't know what way to put it without sounding like a jerk, but I'm looking to buy a house, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in my generation that is too. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the few few cities that have already started crashing. I found a video, and let's react to it.
Folks, this housing crash is happening right now in the spring of 2022, and it is happening really, really fast, way faster than anyone expected. And right now, there's certain cities, there's certain neighborhoods and counties in America where home values could have already gone down by 15 to 20% based on the data that I'm about to show you in this video. Now, before showing you this data, I want to prep you for what you're about to see. We're going to compare listings on the market in the U.S. housing market right now compared to what Zillow said the true value of these homes was. A lot of you might be familiar with Zillow's estimate of home values, sometimes called the Zestimate. This is derived from looking at sales comps and listing comps in an area and allows Zillow to put an approximate valuation on almost every home in America. What we're seeing right now is that when a seller comes to market in late May, they are now listing their house for a much lower value than the Zillow estimate indicates. And
I'm seeing this in my area too, but he's going to talk about it, and it really affects. I'll let him talk about it.
In many cases, this is extreme. For instance, take a look at the Bay Area. We can see here in East Bay, Alameda County, which includes Oakland, of the 727 listings on the market this weekend, they average about a 16% decline in the list price from what Zillow said the value was. And we can see, zooming in further to a zip code level, there's certain zip codes and neighborhoods that are down by as much as 30%. And to really
30%, that's crazy. That's a lot of money.
Understand what's going on here, take a look at this listing that's currently on Zillow, a 2-bed, 2-bath in Oakland. It's currently on the market for $979,000. That's a massive 35% below what Zillow still says the value estimate is of $1.4 million. You can see that basically this uptick in values that occurred during the pandemic has now been completely erased for this home, and its current list price of $979,000 is barely above what it sold for in 2018. And basically there's a reset going on in that.
And the reason why this reset is going on, because I believe that, in that area, obviously, when it comes to the companies that are buying houses, they're buying houses in, I don't want to call in middle class areas. They're not buying these houses in wealthy areas, because wealthy people will just go out and probably buy and build their own home instead of renting for someone forever. But they're buying them in these middle class homes. So there's not as much competition with the wealth. Like, the higher up, the more expensive a house is, the less people that can afford it. So not even like the companies were buying these houses. And now that the interest rate is starting to go up for taking out a home loan, well, there's less people that want to buy houses now. So those houses are getting less offers, and they're taking a hit when it comes to getting offers.
The U.S. housing market right now, where a lot of the appreciation that occurred during the pandemic, particularly the last 6 to 12 months, well, it's almost as if sellers coming to market right now are acting as if that appreciation never happened, and they're listing their homes for what the value was 6, 12, maybe 18 months ago. And in one second, I'm going to show you the cities where this is happening most, because it's not just the Bay Area. This is places like Denver and Dallas and many other areas around America. But first, you got to understand why this is happening. Why in just 2 to 3 weeks have we seen such an about face in the U.S. housing market? And it really has to do with the tremendous drop in home buyer demand that's occurred over the last 2 months in America. Due to higher mortgage rates, due to inflation, due to the stock market crash, home buyers no longer have the money to be able to afford buying houses in today's market. And that's why we've seen mortgage purchase applications decline by a massive 35% from its pandemic peak. And
That's ridiculous. That's crazy.
now basically the home buyer demand in America in May 2022 is at basically its lowest level in the last 5 years.
When was that? 2020? Okay, so in May of 2020, that makes sense because of the pandemic. People weren't buying houses, but it's continuing to drop, and this goes all. This doesn't go back to 2008. That's interesting.
Coinciding with this collapse in homebuyer demand are more and more storm clouds on the horizon for the US economy. 80% of Americans now think a recession is going to occur by the end of 2022, and we're just seeing every single week more and more publicly traded companies getting crushed in the stock market, reporting big losses in earnings. The writing seems to be on the wall for a recession by the end of this year. So when you combine that with the drop in homebuyer demand, that's causing a lot of sellers who are listing their homes on the market to feel a sense of desperation and urgency. No longer are they chasing the sky-high values and sky-high sales prices that occurred just 3 to 4 months ago. They are now setting more realistic expectations of what they expect to get for their property. For instance,
because people are still trying to sell their houses, but the thing is, if you price it too high with the inflation, along with the inflation and the interest rates that have been raised, people just can't afford it. I mean, I seen an example on the internet where this guy was talking, I think it was a $400,000 house. And when he purchased the $400,000 house, if he ought to bought it at the, when interest rates were at its peak, which is about 2.5%, maybe 3%, he could have, for $400,000, he could have afforded, his payment would have been about $1,800. That same $400,000 house today would run him about, I want to say $2,800. So that's an extra $1,000. So not only would someone like who could afford an $1,800 a month house not be able to afford the $400,000 house anymore, but now he's probably, for $1,800, you might not get a house for another $250 range. And you probably don't want a house that's $250,000. So a lot of people are just like, nah, I'm going to wait because it doesn't make sense to buy it now.
Take a look at this 3-bed, 3-bath listing in Denver, which has now been on the market for 10 days. Its current list price of $899,000 is a massive 23% below what the Zillow value estimate was from last month. Not only that, the current list price is actually below what the value estimate was in late 2018. And it's almost as if some of these sellers are coming into the market to sell their homes, like on this listing in Denver, and they're saying, you know what, I don't really believe that the appreciation during the pandemic is real. I don't believe that the 24% home price growth in Denver, according to Zillow, or the 22% home price growth, according to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, is a legitimate figure. And thus, I'm going to list my house for a figure I can sell it for, which I think is 5, 10, 15, even 20% below.
And the thing about it that's interesting is if you list it for 20% below, what they're trying to do is attract more buyers. You attract more buyers and then they bid the price up. But the problem is, if they're not getting offers and they've listed it for a lower price, but they're not getting the offers to even bid it up to a decent amount, that's what the comp is. Like your house, your house is valued at what other houses can sell for in your area. So if you got a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house and you've seen in your neighborhood 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom houses sell in the last few months for $400,000, then your house is worth $400,000. But if that's not the case, then you can't sell it for that amount.
What the same listings were going for just a couple months ago. And what's crazy about this sudden flash crash in the housing market is that this is just the beginning. We're only a couple weeks into the mainstream narrative on the housing market flipping into the negative direction. And you got to understand that as the economic storm clouds I talked about earlier become worse and America hits a recession, that's going to further deteriorate demand in the housing market. All of a sudden, the layoffs are going to get a lot more widespread. People who own homes are going to get laid off and are going to be forced to sell. People who are looking to buy a home are going to get laid off and can no longer buy a home. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be bad, and that's going to cause the market to go down even further throughout the year. But the timing is not going to be equivalent everywhere, folks. We can see that right now the biggest drop in values is occurring in places like Alameda County in San Francisco, Santa Clara County in San Jose. We see San Francisco, Seattle, Boulder, Seattle, LA, Portland, San Francisco, LA, Denver, Washington, D.C.
So yeah, so like I said, these are in some of like the populated cities where like a lot of people want to live, and the prices of these houses are expensive. So that's why those prices are starting to drop, because the houses are a lot more expensive, and the more expensive your house is, the higher your interest. 5% interest rate for a $200,000 house is probably only a couple extra $100 from 3% interest rate to a 5% interest rate. But if it's $1 million house, that's a huge difference.
Denver, San Diego, Denver, Dallas, Ogden, Dallas, you can see that the markets with the biggest declines in values already are primarily in expensive, tech-driven housing markets. That's the trend we're seeing right now in real time, that markets on the higher end of the price point spectrum, where buyers were already kind of priced out, well, now they're really priced out because of higher mortgage rates and demand is just falling off a cliff. You can see that exemplified very clearly on this scatter plot where we're comparing the median list price of these counties this weekend in America compared to the percentage decline in list price from the Zestimate. The higher the list price is, the higher the decline in values. But interestingly, if you go to an area like Baltimore, where the median list price is only $250,000, you can see that's actually above what the Zillow estimate is. Or in a place like Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, where
no one wants to live there. That's why. I mean, Baltimore. I got some friends that live there, but no one wants to live in Allegheny County, Pittsburgh. I mean, Pennsylvania. And if you live there, I'm sorry.
the median list price is $270, that's actually 4% above the Zestimate. So what we're seeing is that affordable areas in America are still appreciating. In affordable pockets, there's still a lot of home buyers rushing in to buy, and as a result, the sellers who are listing in those affordable places like Baltimore and Pittsburgh are still listing at a high price because they know the demand is there. So this housing crash is something that's going to basically spread from west to east. We're seeing it most severe in California right now. We're seeing it in Washington and Oregon and Idaho. We're seeing it in Utah and Colorado. These are the areas where, according to the National Association of Realtors, home buyer traffic has declined the most and where home sales have declined the most. And what's actually really crazy about these markets is that inventory is still at a record low. Like, we've seen an increase in listings in many of these markets, but for instance, if you go to Seattle, inventory is about 60% below where it was 3 years ago prior to the pandemic.
And I don't remember if it was him who explained this, but I'm going to explain it really quick. And if he explains it again, then we'll skip it. But basically, the reason why the housing market is so, like, the inventory is so low is because builders aren't building as much as they were before. Because the thing about when you build a home, you request to build a home, right? And then after it's built, then you get a mortgage. So it's people that have planned on spending, let's use the $400,000 thing again. There's people that planned on spending $1,800 a month on a house, on a $400,000 house, and now after it's been built months later, and the interest rate on the mortgages have went up, they can't afford that $400,000 house at $2,800 a month. So they have to just say that they're not gonna build it. Like they can't accept the house anymore. And then on the flip side, before with what happened was with mortgages is when there was a lot of people trying to buy houses, what the builders were doing is, like, say I wanted to buy a house. I went to a builder and put a deposit down and I wanted to buy this house. After it was built, that $400,000 house, if he was getting offers for $480,000, he would just say, forget me. He would take the little $20,000 penalty and he'd sell that house, my house, the one that I asked him to build, he'd sell it for $480,000 to someone else, and I'd be out of a house. So it's kind of like a catch-22 in that sense. So
even with that record low inventory, it's not stopping sellers from cutting their list price. And that's ultimately what's kind of scary about what's happening right now, is that inventory is still really low. And you have to ask yourself the question, what happens over the next 3 to 6 months as inventory increases and continues to increase on the market? Because if reduced list prices are already coming with record low inventory, you can bet by the fall, when inventory is getting closer to what it was before the pandemic, that the cuts are going to be huge. And unfortunately for the housing market, that timing is likely to coincide with the recession that I've talked about.
And you got foreclosures that haven't hit the market yet either, that are going to hit, and people
already in this video, which is going to further dampen demand, but it's also going to coincide in the summer and fall with another thing that people have forgotten about, and that's the foreclosure backlog in America. That's right, everyone. People forgot all about the foreclosures. Well, according to data from Black Knight Mortgage, there's 640,000 mortgage loans that are more than 90 days past due in serious delinquency, but not in foreclosure. Those 640,000 delinquent loans are going to be foreclosed on very, very soon, now that yet the foreclosure moratoriums are over. And in fact, you can already see these foreclosures building up on Zillow. For instance, if we take a look at LA County on Zillow, we can see there's 7,400 homes on the market. Now, if I go to the for sale button, get rid of everything except foreclosed and pre-foreclosures, you can see that we have a lot of pre-foreclosures sitting there waiting to hit the market. You can
Look at that, 3 million, 1 million.
see the list if you scroll down and look at every single
It's
one with a
expensive houses. Oh, I can get one of those. Look at that $1 million pre-foreclosure.
pre-foreclosure
5 million.
filing. These pre-foreclosures are going to hit the housing market later this year just as inventory continues to surge and job losses mount, which is going to further push home prices down. I'm going to cover my outlook on the US housing market more later this week, specifically the cities that have the biggest foreclosure backlog. So if you're interested in that content, make sure you're a subscriber to this channel so you don't miss those videos when they come out.
All right, that's pretty much that video. Yeah, so the housing market is falling. It's starting to fall, and it's gonna start to fall in the more expensive areas. Honestly, if you're someone that's looking to buy a house in like the middle class area, maybe the 200, 300,000, $400,000 range, I don't know if you're gonna see a huge drop in price, but definitely if you're in one of the more expensive areas, you probably will. So just stay tuned. That's all I got for y'all. Hit the like, comment, share, subscribe, and I holla.
Dreams has always been vivid.